They left me in the airport lounge at 3 in the afternoon. I watched them through the glass wall. Marcus carried the boarding passes. Lisa walked beside him, her hand on Emma's shoulder, steering her toward Gate 47, Hawaii. 2 weeks of sun and water and family togetherness without me. I sat in the hard plastic chair and counted the hours, 8 of them. From 7 in the morning, when Marcus picked me up from the house I'd lived in for 42 years, promising we'd all fly together, making sure I had my bag packed, my pills organised, my seat assignment confirmed. The flight left at 3:15. They boarded at 2:45. I stayed where Marcus had left me, his voice still echoing in my head. "Wait here, Mom. I need to sort something with the tickets. Just 15 minutes." That was at noon. The television above my head played news I didn't process. A woman beside me ate pretzels from a small bag, the crinkling sound sharp in the spaces between announcements. "Flight 237 to Honolulu now boarding at Gate 47. My flight. Their flight. I felt the weight of my purse on my lap. Inside it, my boarding pass sat folded in the zippered pocket where I'd placed it that morning. Careful and ready. My hands rested on the worn leather, fingers tracing the strap I'd carried for 15 years since Robert died, and I learned how to do everything alone except apparently know when my own son was lying to me. 3:15 came and went. The departure board updated. Flight 237 departed. I looked at my phone. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. I stood up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knees from sitting too long in one position, and walked to the window. The plane was still visible on the tarmac, a silver body catching the late afternoon light. As I watched, it began to move, pulling away from the gate, rolling toward the runway with my family inside it. The woman with the pretzels glanced at me, then away, embarrassed to witness whatever this was. I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and stood there with my hand pressed against the cold metal wall. My chest felt tight. Not pain exactly, something worse. The feeling of being erased, of standing in a space where you're supposed to exist and finding only air. When I came out, I washed my hands with the automatic soap dispenser, dried them under the loud dryer, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. 77 years old. Grey hair cut short because I'd gotten tired of pins and clips. Lines around my mouth and eyes that mapped every smile, every worry, every year of raising children and burying a husband and showing up when people needed me. What I saw was someone who'd been left behind. I walked back through the terminal, past the coffee shops and bookstores and families rushing toward their gates, and stopped at the ticketing desk. The agent looked up with professional brightness. "Can I help you?" "I need a ticket," I said. "Where to?" I hadn't thought about it. Hawaii was gone. Home was Marcus's house, technically. since I'd sold my own place 8 months ago and moved into his guest room at Lisa's insistence. "You can't manage alone anymore, Mum. It's too much for you. We have space." Space they didn't want me to occupy. "Portland," I said, "one way." The agent's fingers moved across the keyboard. "There's a flight at 6:30. Gets in at 8:45 local time. I'll take it." She quoted the price. I reached into my purse and pulled out the debit card connected to the account Marcus didn't know about, the one I'd opened 3 years ago, quietly moving $200 a month from my Social Security check into savings. That had no name attached except mine. $2,200 sitting in a bank in a different state, waiting for something I hadn't been able to name until this moment. The card went through. Boarding pass printed. "Gate 12, she said, handing it to me. "You have about an hour." I thanked her and walked toward security. My small rolling suitcase bumping against my leg with each step. Everything I'd packed for Hawaii. Swimsuit I'd never worn. Sundresses for dinners I wouldn't attend. Sunscreen for skin that would stay pale through another Oregon autumn. I bought a sandwich I didn't eat, and a bottle of water I sipped slowly, sitting at gate 12. Watching people who had places to go and people waiting for them. A young mother bounced a crying baby. An elderly couple held hands, their fingers intertwined with the comfort of decades. A businessman typed on his laptop, frowning at the screen. I thought about calling Marcus. I thought about sending a text to Lisa. I did neither. When they called for boarding, I stood in line with my Group 3 designation and handed my pass to the gate agent, who scanned it without looking at my face. I walked down the jetway, found my seat in row 23, and buckled myself in. The plane filled around me. A teenager took the window seat, immediately plugging in earbuds. The aisle seat stayed empty. We pushed back from the gate at 6:32. The flight attendant demonstrated oxygen masks and emergency exits and flotation devices, her hands moving through practiced motions. I watched her point toward the wings and wondered what it meant to find your own oxygen mask first, to save yourself before attempting to save anyone else. The engines roared. We lifted. Below me the city became a grid of lights and streets and lives continuing without pause. Somewhere down there, my son and his wife and their daughter were probably unpacking in a hotel room with an ocean view, arguing about dinner reservations, or what to do tomorrow, not thinking about the woman they'd left sitting in an airport lounge for 8 hours. Or maybe they were thinking about me. Maybe Lisa was saying, "She'll be fine, Marcus. She'll figure it out." Maybe Marcus was nodding, wanting to believe that his 77-year-old mother could just figure it out, could find her way home from an airport alone, could stop being a burden they had to carry. The plane leveled out. The seatbelt sign dimmed. I closed my eyes and let myself feel it, all of it. The abandonment, the betrayal, the shame of being someone's problem instead of someone's mother. The weight of years spent prioritizing everyone else's comfort, everyone else's needs, everyone else's definition of what my life should look like. And underneath all that, something new, a small flame of anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, the quiet kind. The kind that burns slow and steady and doesn't go out. I thought about the last 8 months in Marcus's house. The guest room with its beige walls and single window facing the neighbour's fence. The mornings when I came downstairs to find Lisa already dressed for work, her laptop open at the kitchen table, barely looking up when I asked if she wanted coffee. The evenings when Emma rushed past my hello to get to her room, her phone more interesting than anything her grandmother might say. I'd tried to be useful. I'd cooked dinners they picked at, saying they were trying to eat lighter. I'd offered to help Emma with homework and been told she had a tutor. I'd suggested outings and been met with busy schedules, prior commitments, maybe next weeks that never came. I became furniture, a chair in the corner, something to navigate around. Lisa started leaving articles on my bed. Retirement communities, assisted living brochures, places with names like Sunset Gardens and Golden Years Manor, where people my age could have activities and friends and trained staff to help with medications. "I'm fine," I'd said. "Of course you are," she'd replied, "but wouldn't it be nice to have people your own age, things to do?" What she meant was, wouldn't it be nice if you were somewhere else? The flight attendant came by with drinks. I asked for tomato juice, something I never ordered, something that tasted like a choice I was making for no reason except that I could. The teenager beside me was asleep, head against the window, peaceful in the way only the young can be. Portland appeared below us at 8:43, 2 minutes early. A sprawl of lights along a dark river. Bridges strung like necklaces, neighbourhoods spreading into hills. I'd never been here before, didn't know a single person, had no plan beyond getting off this plane and finding a place to sleep. The uncertainty should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something close to relief. We landed smoothly. I waited for everyone else to deplane, then pulled my suitcase from the overhead bin and joined the stream of people moving through the terminal. Baggage claim, ground transportation, signs pointing toward car rentals and hotel shuttles and taxis. I stopped at an information desk where a young woman with purple hair smiled at me. "Can I help you find something?" "A hotel," I said. "Nothing fancy, just clean and safe." She pulled out a map and circled several options. "This one's closest," she said, tapping a spot near the airport. "Shuttle runs every 20 minutes. Or there's the downtown area if you want to be near restaurants and shops." "Downtown," I said. She circled another location and handed me the map. "Shuttles outside door 3. I thanked her and followed the signs, emerging into the cool October night. The air smelled different here, crisp and green, with something like rain underneath it. The shuttle arrived within 10 minutes, and I climbed aboard with my suitcase, taking a seat near the front. The driver, a man in his 50s, with kind eyes, glanced at me in the mirror. "First time in Portland?" "Yes." "Visiting family?" "Starting over." He smiled at that, like he'd heard stranger things, and pulled into traffic. We drove through neighbourhoods I couldn't name, past houses with lit windows and cars in driveways, past convenience stores and gas stations, and the ordinary infrastructure of other people's lives. The hotel was called the Morrison, a brick building with 6 floors and a lobby that smelled like coffee and old carpet. I checked in with a woman who didn't ask questions, just took my credit card and handed me a key card to room 304. "Third floor," she said. "Elevators on your right. Breakfast is 6 to 9. I rode up alone, found my room, and locked the door behind me. The space was small. A bed with a green comforter, a desk with a chair, a bathroom with tiles that had probably been white once. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands in my lap, feeling the silence of this unfamiliar place settle around me like something I could breathe. My phone buzzed. I pulled it from my purse and looked at the screen. "Marcus." "Finally," the text said. "Mum, where are you? We thought you were right behind us." "At the airport. Call me." I stared at the words. "We thought you were right behind us." As if I'd wandered off like a confused child, as if 8 hours sitting alone in a lounge didn't require explanation or apology. I turned the phone off and set it on the nightstand. Then I unpacked my suitcase, hanging the sundresses I wouldn't need, lining up my pills on the bathroom counter, placing my toothbrush in the plastic cup by the sink. Small acts of establishing myself in this temporary space. When I finished, I changed into my nightgown, washed my face, and climbed into bed. The mattress was firmer than I was used to. The sounds from the street below filtered through the window, voices, car engines, the distant wail of a siren. I lay there listening to a city I didn't know, in a room where no one expected me to be, and felt the weight of the day press against my chest. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over the past 8 months. Quiet tears in the guest room, while Lisa talked to Marcus downstairs about how long I'd be staying. Silent sobs in the shower when Emma told her friend I was just staying for a little while. Exhausted weeping after dinners, where I'd cooked for 3 hours only to have them order takeout instead. No more crying. I closed my eyes and let myself drift, and somewhere in the space between waking and sleep, I felt something shift. A small internal recalibration. The first step toward becoming someone I'd forgotten I could be. In the morning, I ate the hotel breakfast. Scrambled eggs from a warming tray, toast with butter packets, coffee in a paper cup. Then I walked outside into a grey October day and started looking for a room to rent. The woman at the front desk had given me a newspaper, and I sat on a bench 2 blocks from the hotel, circling ads with a pen I'd taken from my purse. Room available, $400 month, utilities included. Studio, $650, no pets. Furnished room, mature tenant preferred, $425. I called the number for the furnished room. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was rough, a smoker's rasp. Yeah, I'm calling about the room for rent, still available. You want to see it? Yes. Address is 28847 Southeast Hawthorne. Can you be here in an hour? I can. She hung up without saying goodbye. I asked someone at a coffee shop how to get to Southeast Hawthorne and learned about the bus system, bought a day pass and rode the number 14 east, watching the city change from downtown towers to residential streets. Lined with craftsman houses and corner stores, I got off at the cross street the woman had named and walked 3 blocks north until I found 2847, a pale blue house with a wide porch and a yard that needed mowing. I knocked. The woman who opened the door was probably 60, built solid, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She looked me over with quick efficiency. You the one who called? Yes, I'm Evelyn. Joyce, come on. I followed her through a living room crowded with books and plants, down a hallway to a door at the back of the house. She opened it to reveal a small room with a single bed, a dresser, and a window facing the backyard. Shared bathroom down the hall. Kitchen privileges if you clean up after yourself. $400 a month, first and last due now. The room was clean. The bed had a quilt that looked handmade. The window let in grey light that made everything feel soft and possible. I'll take it, I said. Joyce studied me for a moment. You running from something? Not running, choosing something different. She nodded like that made sense. Cash or cheque? I have a debit card, bank's 2 blocks down, ATM on the corner. Get me $800 and you can move in today. I walked to the ATM, withdrew the money in 20s and 50s, and brought it back to Joyce, who counted it twice before nodding and handing me a key. Welcome home, she said, and those 2 words hit harder than I expected. I moved my things from the hotel that afternoon, paid the early checkout fee without regret, and settled into the room at the back of Joyce's house. That night, I sat on the bed and turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, 3 voicemails. I listened to the first voicemail, Marcus's voice, tight with worry. Mum, please call me back. We need to know you're safe. We're worried sick. The second was Lisa. Evelyn, this isn't funny. Marcus is beside himself. We've called the police. The third was Marcus again. "Mum, I'm sorry. Whatever happened, I'm sorry. Just let us know where you are." I deleted all 3 and typed a single text. "I'm fine. Don't call the police. I need time." I sent it before I could second-guess myself, then turned the phone off again and placed it in the dresser drawer. The silence that followed felt like space I could finally stretch into. The next morning, I walked the neighbourhood. Southeast Hawthorne was lined with coffee shops, used bookstores, vintage clothing stores, small restaurants with handwritten menus in the windows. I passed people walking dogs, pushing strollers, sitting on benches reading paperbacks. No one looked at me twice. I was just another person on the street, unremarkable and unnoticed, and the anonymity felt like freedom. I stopped at a corner café called Rosie's. The interior was small and warm, with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. A woman about my age stood behind the counter wearing an apron that said, "Coffee first, talk later." "What can I get you?" she asked. "Just coffee? Black. For here or to go?" "Here." She poured it into a ceramic mug and set it on the counter. $2. I paid and took the mug to a table by the window where I sat watching the street and feeling the warmth of the cup between my hands. The coffee was better than anything I'd made in Marcus's kitchen. Strong and dark, with a slight bitterness that tasted like honesty. A man came in and ordered tea. An older woman asked for a scone and sat at the table beside me, opening a crossword puzzle. The rhythm of the place was gentle and easy, people coming and going without urgency, finding small comforts in ordinary moments. When I finished my coffee, I brought the mug back to the counter. The woman in the apron was wiping down the espresso machine. "Thank you," I said. "That was exactly what I needed." She smiled. "First time here?" "Yes. I just moved to the neighbourhood." "Welcome. I'm Rosie. Evelyn." She shook my hand with a firm grip. "You need anything, you let me know. I've been here 20 years, know everyone and everything. Actually," I said, "do you know anyone hiring?" She tilted her head, considering. "You looking for work?" "Yes." "What can you do?" "I can show up on time and do what needs doing." Rosie laughed. "That's more than most people. You ever worked in a café?" "No." "But I raised 2 children and managed a household for 40 years. I can learn." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Morning shift starts at 6. 4 hours, 5 days a week. Minimum wage plus tips. You interested?" "Very." "Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes." "Then I'll see you at 6. Bring comfortable shoes." I walked back to Joyce's house feeling lighter than I had in months. The sensation was strange and unfamiliar, this sense of purpose that belonged only to me, this choice I'd made without consulting anyone or considering anyone else's needs, or worrying about being a burden when I got home. and it felt strange to think of this place as home after only one day. Joyce was in the kitchen making soup. The smell of vegetables and herbs filled the small space. "Want some?" she asked, not looking up from the pot she was stirring. "If you're offering." She ladled soup into 2 bowls and set them on the table. We ate together in comfortable silence, the only sound the scrape of spoons against ceramic and the occasional car passing outside. "You find work already?" Joyce asked. "At the café down the street. Start tomorrow, fast mover, no point sitting around." Joyce nodded like that was wisdom worth acknowledging. "You got people looking for you?" "Probably." "They going to find you?" "Not if I don't want them to." She smiled at that. "Good." After dinner, I went to my room and unpacked the rest of my suitcase, finding space in the dresser for my clothes, setting my few books on the windowsill, arranging my pills in a small basket on the dresser. The room was simple and spare, nothing like the house. I'd lived in for 42 years with Robert, nothing like the guest room in Marcus's home where I'd felt like an unwelcome visitor. But it was mine. I lay down on the bed and looked at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster, and thought about the life I was building here. A room, a job, a landlady who asked direct questions and accepted direct answers. A neighbourhood where I could walk without anyone knowing my name or my history or the ways I'd failed to be what my family needed. The phone stayed off in the drawer. The silence stayed gentle and mine, and for the first time in longer than I could remember. I fell asleep without that heavy weight pressing on my ribs, the weight of being somewhere I wasn't wanted, of trying to shrink myself small enough to fit into spaces that had no room for me. My first shift at Rose's started at 6 the next morning. I arrived at 5:55, wearing the comfortable shoes I'd bought at a thrift store the day before and the cardigan I'd owned for 10 years that still held its shape. Rosie was already there, setting up the espresso machine, filling the pastry case with muffins and scones. "Morning," she said. "Ready?" "Ready." She showed me how to work the register, where to find the cups and lids, how to make change and process credit cards. She demonstrated the difference between a latte and a cappuccino, how to steam milk without scalding it, how to pour without making a mess. The work was simple but required attention. Customers started arriving at 6:30, ordering their morning coffee with the kind of ritualized precision that spoke of daily habits and necessary routines. "Grand dark roast, no room. Medium vanilla latte, extra hot. Small Americano, 2 shots. I learned their orders, learned their names, learned the rhythm of the morning rush and the quieter pace of mid-morning when only a few people drifted in, working on laptops or reading newspapers. By 10, when my shift ended, my feet hurt and my back was sore and my hands smelled like coffee, grounds and dish soap. I felt useful. "How'd I do?" I asked Rosie as I untied my apron. "You'll do fine," she said. "Same time tomorrow? Same time." I walked home in the October sunshine, feeling the warmth on my face, and stopped at a small grocery store to buy bread and cheese and apples. Simple food I could prepare in Joyce's kitchen without taking up too much space or creating too much mess. When I got back to the house, Joyce was in the backyard pulling weeds from a garden bed. She looked up when I came through the gate. "How was it?" "Good, really good." She nodded and went back to her weeding, and I went inside to put away my groceries, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles used in new ways, the satisfaction of hours spent doing something that mattered, even if it was just making coffee for strangers who needed it. That evening, I turned my phone on long enough to check messages. More from Marcus, more from Lisa. One from Emma that said, "Grandma, please come back, we miss you." I read that one twice, feeling the complicated tangle of love and hurt, and knowing that missing someone and wanting them there are sometimes two different things. I turned the phone off and put it back in the drawer. The weeks developed their own rhythm. Wake at 5:15, walk to Rosie's in the dark, work until 10, walk home. Afternoons were mine to spend however I chose, and the luxury of that autonomy never stopped feeling precious. I bought a library card and spent hours in the reading room, going through novels I'd been meaning to read for years. I walked different routes through the neighborhood, learning which streets had the best gardens, which houses had friendly dogs that waited at the fence for attention, which coffee shops besides Rosie's made good tea. Joyce and I fell into an easy coexistence. She wasn't much for conversation, but she'd occasionally ask if I wanted to watch a movie or share whatever she was cooking. We'd sit together in the living room with our plates balanced on our laps, watching old films. On her ancient television, not talking much, but comfortable in the silence. My first paycheck came on a Friday morning in early November. Rosie handed me the envelope with a smile. "Not much, but it's yours." I walked to the bank and deposited most of it, keeping back $100 in cash. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself. Not practical shopping, not buying what I needed, just browsing and looking and finding something I wanted. The thrift store 3 blocks from Joyce's house had a coat in the window, dark blue wool with wooden buttons and a collar that could turn up against the wind, good quality, the kind that lasts. The kind I would have bought 20 years ago, when Robert and I still had extra money for things that weren't necessary but made life a little better. I tried it on. It fit perfectly across the shoulders, the sleeves the right length, the hem falling just below my hips. The price tag said $45. I paid with my own money. Money I'd earned making coffee and wiping down tables and showing up at 5:55 every morning without fail. I carried the coat home in a paper bag and hung it in my closet, running my hand over the wool, feeling the weight of it, the quality of it, the simple fact that I'd chosen it and bought it. And it belonged to me. That night I wore it to dinner at a small Thai restaurant Joyce had recommended. I sat alone at a table for two, ordered pad thai and hot tea, and watched other diners through the window. Couples sharing spring rolls, families with small children negotiating over noodles, a group of friends laughing over shared plates. I wasn't lonely, I was alone, but I wasn't lonely, and understanding the difference felt like something worth celebrating. When I got home, there was a letter waiting on the hall table. Joyce must have brought in the mail and set it aside for me. The envelope had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Kieran, my grandson. I took it to my room and sat on the bed before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper torn from a notebook. "Grandma," it said, "are you okay? Dad won't tell me what happened, just that you left and you're somewhere safe. I'm worried about you. I miss our talks. Can you at least let me know you're all right? Love, Kieran." I read it 3 times, feeling the tightness in my throat that came with knowing someone cared enough to ask, someone wanted to know where I was, not to control me, but to connect with me. Kieran was 19, a sophomore in college studying biology. He'd always been different from his parents, quieter and more thoughtful, interested in things that required patience and attention. When I'd lived with them, he'd sometimes knock on my door after dinner to ask about Robert, about what it was like when I was young, about the places I'd travelled before he was born. Those conversations had been the only good part of those 8 months. I got out paper and a pen and wrote back, "Dear Kieran, I'm fine, better than fine, actually. I'm in a new city, in a good place, with good people. I'm working and taking care of myself. I'm sorry if I worried you. That wasn't my intention, but I needed to make some changes, and sometimes change looks like disappearing for a while. I love you. I'll write again soon. Grandma." I addressed the envelope to his dorm, not to Marcus's house, and walked to the corner mailbox to send it before I could second-guess the decision. The next morning at Rosie's, a man came in who I'd seen several times before. He always ordered the same thing, medium dark roast, no room, and always sat at the same table by the window, reading the newspaper. He was probably in his early 70s, tall and thin, with white hair and reading glasses he kept on a chain around his neck. "Morning, Arthur," Rosie said when he walked in. "Morning, Rosie." "And good morning to you," he said, nodding at me. "Good morning. You're new," he said. "Haven't seen you before a few weeks ago." "I just started." "Welcome to the neighbourhood. I'm Arthur." Evelyn, he paid for his coffee and took his usual seat, and I went back to wiping down the counter. But over the following days, he started staying later, past when he finished his newspaper, and sometimes he'd ask me questions. Where was I from? What brought me to Portland? Did I like it here? I answered honestly but carefully, giving him enough to be friendly without revealing too much. And gradually, our morning exchanges became something I looked forward to, these small conversations with someone who asked because he was genuinely curious, not because he was checking up on me or worried I couldn't manage on my own. One morning in mid-November, he said, "Would you like to have lunch sometime, as friends? I know a good diner that makes excellent pie. I'd like that. How about Thursday? I can pick you up here after your shift." Thursday works. On Thursday, we went to the diner and ate sandwiches and shared a piece of apple pie with ice cream. Arthur told me about his life. 40 years as an engineer, 3 grown children scattered across the country, a wife who died 6 years ago from cancer. He talked about the loneliness of losing someone you've built a life with, the strangeness of having all this time and no one to share it with. I told him about Robert, about our 42 years together, about the house we'd owned and the children we'd raised and the ways grief changes shape over time but never quite leaves. I didn't tell him about Marcus or Lisa or being abandoned in an airport. Not yet. But I felt the possibility that someday I might, and that possibility felt like trust beginning to form. We started having lunch once a week, sometimes at the diner, sometimes at a Vietnamese place Arthur liked, once at a pizza restaurant where we sat in a booth and talked for 3 hours about books and politics and what it meant to build a life that mattered in the small, ordinary ways. Arthur never asked for more than I was willing to give, never pushed for information. I wasn't ready to share, never suggested I was doing anything wrong by being here, by choosing this life, by walking away from family obligations that had become chains. He just showed up, paid for lunch, listened when I talked, and talked when I was ready to listen. And slowly, I realized I was building something here. Not just a life, but a network of small connections that added up to community. Joyce, who left me soup when she made extra. Rosie, who taught me how to make a perfect cappuccino and trusted me to open the café when she needed a morning off. Arthur, who waited for me at the diner with a smile that said he was genuinely happy to see me. These were people who chose to know me, who wanted me there, who didn't see me as a burden or a problem or an inconvenience to manage. They just saw me.
One evening in late November, I was walking home from the library when I passed a newspaper stand. The headline on the local section caught my eye: "Missing Senior, Sought by Family." I stopped, pulled $1 from my pocket, bought the paper. The article was short, buried on page 3. Evelyn Crawford, 77, last seen at Portland International Airport in early October. Family concerned for her welfare and asking anyone with information to contact Portland police.
Photo included showed me from 5 years ago standing in Marcus's backyard at a family barbecue, smiling at the camera I looked at that photo, at the woman I'd been, trying so hard to fit into a life that had no space for her, and felt nothing but pity. I folded the newspaper and dropped it in a recycling bin. They could look all they wanted. I wasn't missing. I knew exactly where I was. The newspaper article changed things. Not immediately, but gradually, like a stone dropped in water, the ripples spreading outward. The next day at Rose's, a woman I'd never seen before came in during the morning rush. She ordered a latte but didn't take it to a table. Instead, she stood at the counter watching me work, her face partially hidden behind oversized sunglasses. When the rush cleared, she walked to the window and stood there, looking in at me. "Lisa." She didn't come inside, just stood there for maybe 5 minutes, her hand pressed against the glass like she might push through it, like she might walk in and demand explanations or apologies or whatever it was she thought I owed her. Then she turned and walked away. I didn't follow, didn't call out, didn't acknowledge that I'd seen her, just kept wiping down the espresso machine, my hand steady even as my heart raced. Rosie noticed. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "That someone you know? Someone I used to know?" She nodded and didn't press, and I was grateful for her silence, for the way she understood that some things didn't need explaining. That afternoon, a man in a suit came to Joyce's house. I was in my room reading when I heard the doorbell, then voices in the living room. Joyce's rough tone and a smoother male voice I didn't recognize. A knock on my door. "Evelyn, someone here to see you." I opened the door to find Joyce standing with her arms crossed and a tall man in his 40s holding a leather briefcase. "Miss Crawford," he said, "my name is David Chen. I'm an attorney representing your son, Marcus Crawford. He's asked me to contact you regarding your well-being and certain financial matters that require your attention. I'm fine, as you can see. And I have no financial matters that require attention. Your son is concerned about your ability to make sound decisions. He's mentioned that you may be experiencing some confusion or... I'm 77, not incapacitated. I left voluntarily. I'm living independently and supporting myself. There's no confusion." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "There are some documents here that... I'm not signing anything. Miss Crawford, I really think it would be in your best interest to..." Joyce stepped forward. She said she's not signing anything. "You got ears? Use them." David Chen looked between us, clearly calculating his next move. Finally, he handed me a business card. "If you change your mind, please contact my office." "I won't." He left, and Joyce closed the door. Behind him, turning to me with raised eyebrows, "Family trouble, you could say that. They trying to declare you incompetent or something?" "Probably." She snorted. "Lot of nerve. You seem pretty damn competent to me." "Thank you." That night, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Marcus, to all of them. Marcus, Lisa, Emma. Words I'd needed to say for months, maybe years. I wrote about the 8 months in their guest room, about the feeling of being invisible, of being tolerated rather than welcomed, of shrinking myself smaller and smaller until I nearly disappeared. I wrote about the airport, about sitting alone for 8 hours while they boarded a plane to Hawaii, about the specific cruelty of that abandonment. I wrote about the life I was building here, the job, the room, the friends, the simple dignity of making my own choices and living with the consequences. And then I wrote the part that mattered most. I'm setting boundaries. I will not be manipulated through guilt or legal pressure. I will not return to a situation where I'm treated as a burden. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on equal terms with mutual respect. Otherwise, I'm fine being alone. I read it 3 times, checking for anger or bitterness or blame, found only honesty. I mailed it the next morning. 2 days later, I went to a lawyer's office and paid for an hour of consultation. I explained the situation, the family pressure, the concern about being declared incompetent, the need to protect my autonomy. The lawyer, a woman named Grace Harper, listened carefully and took notes. "You're clearly of sound mind," she said, "but it wouldn't hurt to have documentation. We can draw up a statement affirming your capacity to make decisions, have it witnessed and notarized, and I'd recommend updating your will and power of attorney to make your wishes clear." I did all of it. Signed papers that said my assets would go to Kieran, not Marcus. Named Grace as my healthcare proxy instead of my son. Paid her fee with money from my café tips and felt the weight of that choice, the permanence of it. That evening, I made another decision. I transferred $5,000 from my savings account to Kieran's college fund, not because he needed it, Marcus had money, but because I wanted him to know that his grandmother saw him, chose him, valued the kind of person he was becoming. I sent him a note with the transfer confirmation. "This is from me to you. Use it for books or rent or pizza with friends or anything that brings you joy. Love, Grandma." The next morning at Rose's, Arthur came in for his coffee and lingered after finishing his newspaper. "You look different," he said. "Lighter somehow. I feel lighter." "Good news, just clarity." He smiled. Clarity's underrated. We had lunch that Thursday at the diner, and I told him everything. The whole story, start to finish. The airport, the guest room, the newspaper article, the lawyer at Joyce's door, the letter I'd sent. He listened without interrupting, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup, his expression thoughtful. When I finished, he said, "You're braver than you think. I'm just doing what I should have done months ago. Still takes courage." We split the apple pie, and he told me about his own experience with his children after his wife died, how they'd tried to manage his grief, organize his life, make decisions for him like he'd somehow become a child again when she passed. I had to draw lines, he said, had to remind them I was still their father, still capable, still deserving of respect. It hurt them, but it was necessary. Do you regret it? No, we're better now, more honest. I hoped that would be true for me and Kieran someday. As for Marcus and Lisa, I wasn't sure. Maybe some relationships couldn't be saved, only ended with as much grace as possible. 3 weeks later, on a cold December morning, Lisa came back. This time she walked into the café, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and sat at a table near the window until my shift ended. When I untied my apron, she stood up. "Can we talk?" "We can." We walked to a small park 2 blocks away and sat on a bench. She looked thinner than I remembered, tired around the eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the airport, for making you feel unwelcome, for—" She stopped, struggling with words, "for everything." "Why did you do it?" She looked at her hands. "I was raised to take care of family. My mother lived with us when I was a kid, and it was hard. She was difficult and demanding, and I watched my mom lose herself trying to keep everyone happy. When Marcus suggested you move in, I thought I'd be different, better. But I wasn't. I didn't want a shadow in every room. So you left me at the airport. It was Marcus's idea. He thought if we just got some space, some time without the tension, we could figure out a better solution. I went along with it because I was too tired to fight, and because part of me wanted you gone." The honesty was like a slap, sharp and clarifying. "Thank you for saying that," I said. She looked surprised. "Thank you for being honest, for not pretending this was all a misunderstanding or that I'm confused. You wanted me gone. You got your wish. Now I've built something better. Are you happy?" "I am." She nodded slowly. "Marcus wants you to come back." "I'm not coming back. What about holidays? What about Emma?" "Emma has your address. She can write if she wants to know me." "But I'm done being an obligation." Lisa stood up, wrapping her coat tighter against the wind. "I don't blame you," she said. "I'd probably do the same thing." She walked away, and I sat there for a while longer, watching the grey sky and feeling something settle inside me. Closure, maybe, or just acceptance that some chapters end without resolution, without reconciliation, without the tidy conclusions we're taught to expect. Christmas came and went. Joyce and I cooked dinner together, a small feast for 2 that we ate while watching a movie about a train full of children travelling to the North Pole. Arthur stopped by with a bottle of wine and a loaf of homemade bread, staying for coffee and conversation before heading to his daughter's house for the evening. It was quiet and simple and enough. On New Year's Day, Kieran called. I'd turned my phone back on for the first time in weeks, checking messages and finding dozens from Marcus, a few from Lisa, and one from Kieran asking if we could talk. I called him back. "Grandma," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I've been so worried. I'm sorry for that. I should have reached out sooner. Dad won't tell me what really happened. I gave him the abbreviated version, the truth, but gentle, without placing all the blame on his parents, even though they deserved it. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I should have noticed," he said. "I should have seen how they were treating you. You were busy with your own life. That's how it should be. Can I come see you during spring break? I'd like that very much." He came in March, checked into a motel near Joyce's house and called when he arrived. I met him at a coffee shop different from Rose's, wanting this to be separate from my daily routine, something special. He looked older than when I'd last seen him, taller maybe, or just carrying himself differently, more confident, less the boy trying to please everyone. We talked for 3 hours about his classes, his girlfriend, his plans after graduation, about what happened with Marcus and Lisa, the details filling in around the edges of what I'd told him on the phone. "I'm not going home for summer," he said. "I got an internship in Seattle. I think Dad's disappointed, but I need some distance." "Good for you," he smiled. "I learned from the best." We had dinner that night at the Thai restaurant I'd been to alone months before. This time I wasn't alone. This time I was sharing spring rolls and pad thai with my grandson, talking and laughing and building a relationship that existed outside of Marcus's house, outside of Lisa's expectations, outside of the roles we'd been assigned. He met Joyce, who interrogated him with the same directness she'd used on me, then nodded approvingly. "Good kid," she told me after he left. "Smart, respectful. You did well with that one." On his last day, Kieran and I walked through the neighbourhood. I showed him Rose's, introduced him to Arthur at the diner, took him past the thrift store where I'd bought my coat. "You seem different," he said. "Happier, I am." "I'm glad you left." "Me too." We stood on the corner near Joyce's house and he hugged me tight. "I want to know you," he said, "on your terms, not as someone's grandmother who has to be managed or taken care of. Just as you." I held him and felt tears on my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind that come when something broken starts to heal. After he left, I went back to my routine. Work at Rose's, lunch with Arthur once a week, quiet evenings with Joyce, long walks through the neighbourhood I'd claimed as mine. Spring turned to summer. I bought a bicycle at a garage sale and rode it to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, filling my basket with vegetables I'd cook in Joyce's kitchen. I started volunteering at the library, shelving books and helping patrons find what they needed. I made friends with other volunteers, women my age who had their own stories of starting over, of choosing themselves after years of choosing everyone else. My savings account grew slowly but steadily. I opened a separate account for emergencies, another for small luxuries. I bought a new dress, not from the thrift store, but from a small boutique, dark green with a pattern of leaves, something beautiful just because I wanted it. Marcus called once. I answered because I was ready. "Mum," he said, "can we talk?" "We can," I'm sorry for all of it. For the airport, for not seeing what Lisa was doing, for not standing up for you. I appreciate that. Can you forgive me? I can forgive you, but I'm not coming back. I know. I want you in my life, somehow. Then visit me. Come here to my space on my terms. Get to know who I am now. Not who you remember. He said he would. I didn't know if he meant it, but I'd given him the option, and that was enough. One evening in late July, I sat on Joyce's front porch with a cup of tea, wearing my second-hand coat against the cool evening air, and thought about the past 10 months. Everything I'd lost, the house I'd sold, the role of mother and grandmother. As I'd known it, the idea that family meant unconditional belonging, and everything I'd gained, autonomy, dignity, relationships built on choice rather than obligation, the quiet strength of knowing I could take care of myself. The coat had become my favorite possession. I wore it everywhere, even when the weather didn't quite require it. It meant something to me, this tangible proof that I could work and earn, and choose and buy something beautiful with my own money, that I could be a person with preferences and desires beyond making sure everyone else was comfortable. Joyce came out and sat beside me. "Nice evening, beautiful. You did good," she said. "Coming here, starting over. Thank you for giving me a place to land. You gave yourself that. I just had a room." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighbours walk their dogs and the teenagers ride skateboards down the sidewalk, and the ordinary life of a street where I belonged. I thought about Evelyn at the airport, sitting alone for 8 hours, and Evelyn now, sitting on this porch with tea and a coat she'd bought herself, and a life she'd built from nothing. They were the same person, but also completely different. I'd learned that dignity wasn't something you waited for others to grant you. It was something you claimed for yourself, one small choice at a time. One room, one job, one coat, one boundary, one relationship rebuilt on honest terms. And I'd learned that starting over at 77 wasn't tragic. It was brave. It was possible. It was mine. Inside the house, my phone buzzed with a text from Kieran, photo attached of him and his girlfriend at graduation. "Proud of you, Grandma," the message said, "for everything." I texted back, "Proud of you too, love you." Then I turned the phone off, finished my tea, and sat on the porch as the sun set over my neighbourhood. My life, my choice. The silence had weight, but it was my silence, and that made all the difference.